Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Clara always thought she knew Benjamin better than anyone. From the start of their marriage, he came across as a man of integrity, responsible and dedicated to his career. Their evening talks after work were usually light, just everyday things, future plans, simple stuff that kept them close. But lately, there was something different in his voice, a weight it hadn't carried before. When he talked about work, his expression changed. His sentences got shorter, like each word was measured to avoid saying too much. Clara noticed, and even though she tried to ignore it, that disguised silence sparked a growing curiosity. It all started when Benjamin mentioned that the company was going through leadership changes and a new manager had taken over his department. The name, Adam Whitmore, came up casually, but it stuck in Clara's memory. He was described as someone who got the job not through merit, but through family connections. Benjamin said his decisions were rushed and often hurt the team. To Clara, who'd always admired her husband's competence and hard work, hearing about a boss like that felt unfair. At first, she just felt angry on Benjamin's behalf for having to deal with such leadership. The stories became more frequent. Benjamin came home visibly drained, and when asked, said he'd spent the day handling confusing orders and pointless changes. Interested in understanding what was really going on, Clara started asking more questions. She wanted to know what Adam was like, how he acted in meetings, what kind of attitude he had with employees. Benjamin answered with straightforward descriptions, almost always tinged with frustration. With each response, Adam's image formed in Clara's mind, like a puzzle being put together piece by piece. She started noticing that the more she listened, the more she wanted to know. She pictured his face, his tone of voice, how he interacted with people. At first, she believed this curiosity was just about understanding what her husband was going through. After all, in her mind, any wife would do the same. But over time, this interest began to feel different, like there was a certain fascination in the mystery. The first moment Adam stopped being just a name was when Clara accidentally found a photo of him on social media. It was a simple picture taken at a corporate event, but it was enough to spark a stronger interest. She didn't mention it to Benjamin, just looked at the photo for a few moments, trying to match the face to the stories she'd heard. There was something in his posture that made her want to know more, like she needed to confirm for herself whether her husband's criticisms were completely fair. Clara began paying attention whenever Benjamin mentioned work. Any comment about a meeting or event where Adam would be present seemed to set off a quiet alert inside her. It was as if every detail was a crucial piece in figuring out who he really was. Nothing was explicit yet, but that curiosity was already taking up too much space in her thoughts. Without even realizing it, Clara started creating an internal script, almost like she was preparing for the moment she might see him in person. It was subtle, something she wouldn't even admit to herself. But it was clear by then that Adam wasn't just the problematic boss messing up Benjamin's routine. He had become an intriguing figure, wrapped in a mix of criticism and mystery, and that combination was having an unexpected effect on her. The day Clara saw Adam in person for the first time was significant for her, even though she tried to act like it was no big deal. Benjamin invited her to a company dinner, one of those events that mixed formality with relaxation, where spouses were welcome. She accepted right away, and her anticipation started building the moment she found out Adam would be there. She didn't tell Benjamin how curious she was, she just got ready more carefully than usual, as if unconsciously wanting to make a good impression. When she saw him for the first time, she felt a strange mix of surprise and confirmation. He didn't look exactly like the pictures she'd found, but there was something in the way he carried himself, the confident way he interacted with others, that immediately caught her attention. When they were introduced, Clara smiled naturally, exchanged a few words, and noticed Adam had a firm but not aggressive tone of voice. He was polite, and even in just a few sentences, he showed confidence. After that meeting, the interest that had only been fed by stories took on clearer shape. Clara started noticing details, the way he looked people directly in the eye during conversations, how he gestured when explaining something, how easily he moved between different groups. To her, each gesture seemed to carry a deeper meaning. Benjamin, during the event, seemed uncomfortable at times. He noticed Clara's attention was more focused on Adam than on anyone else. It wasn't obvious, but the frequency with which she directed comments to him or used small opportunities to get closer created a silent unease. Still, Benjamin tried to keep his composure, talking to other colleagues and avoiding showing irritation in front of everyone. In the days that followed, Clara started bringing up Adam more often. In casual conversations, she found ways to mention something he'd said at the event or highlight a gesture she found interesting. She always kept her tone light, like it was just an innocent observation, but there was too much enthusiasm to go unnoticed. Benjamin began responding more curtly when the topic came up, but Clara either didn't notice or pretended not to. The situation gained momentum when Clara found what seemed like a harmless reason to talk to Adam. One day, she got the idea to organize a surprise party for Benjamin and, in her mind, it would be nice to involve someone from his job to make the plan feel more convincing. She sent Adam a message explaining the idea and asking if he'd be willing to help, maybe invite some coworkers and help keep it secret. He replied immediately, seeming open to the idea, and so their conversations began. At first, they only exchanged messages to discuss possible dates, guest lists, and small details to make the event special. But as weeks passed, the party started fading into the background. Their talks began to go in other directions, first comments about funny office situations, then inside jokes that grew out of those exchanges. Gradually, more personal messages started appearing, along with subtle compliments and a tone that had nothing to do with the party anymore. In the end, the celebration plan never happened. The subject was gradually dropped, as if it didn't matter, but their contact continued. For Clara, it wasn't about the party anymore, it was about the constant attention Adam gave her, the feeling that there was a mutual interest that went beyond any professional courtesy. Benjamin, on the other hand, began to feel that something in Clara's behavior had changed. She showed more interest in events tied to his job, accepted invitations to meetings and gatherings she used to turn down, and always seemed more excited when she knew Adam would be there. There was no direct confrontation at that point, but the atmosphere between them already carried a different weight, like a silent distance was settling in, creating space for tension to grow without either of them putting into words what was really happening. The company's year-end party was highly anticipated, and Benjamin, even without much enthusiasm, knew he had to attend. Clara insisted on going with him, acting like it was completely natural, but deep down she was anxious for another chance to see Adam. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, there was a quiet expectation, an interest she refused to admit to herself. The hall was full of overlapping conversations, music, and scattered laughter. Benjamin greeted a few colleagues while Clara discreetly scanned the groups to find Adam. When she finally spotted him talking with some executives, she realized he had noticed her too. A brief smile exchanged from a distance was enough to make her feel part of a private code only they understood. As time passed, the conversations blended together, and at one point all three, Benjamin, Clara, and Adam, ended up close. A comment about the team's tough year sparked a discussion. Benjamin, used to dealing with the boss's flawed decisions, made firm remarks about internal problems. Adam countered with justifications that, to Benjamin, sounded like excuses. That's when Clara stepped in, saying she understood the pressure Adam was under and that people often judged without knowing all the facts. Her tone left no doubt, she was taking his side. Benjamin was surprised but kept his cool. Adam, though, responded with a slight laugh, thanking Clara's words as if she were a longtime ally. That lit a spark in Benjamin, who fired back more directly, pointing out specific failures that had hurt the whole team. Clara didn't hesitate, she defended Adam again, saying change takes time and instead of criticism, people should support those trying their best. The people around started paying attention. Some exchanged glances, sensing the tension in the air. The argument, which seemed professional to most, clearly carried a personal weight for Benjamin. He felt every word from Clara confirmed that something between them had shifted. With each sentence, his sense of isolation grew, like his own wife was choosing to stand beside someone else in front of everyone. The moment that really ignited the tension was when Benjamin exposed, in front of everyone, a recent mistake that had cost the company dearly. His tone was firm, his words heavy with built-up frustration. Before Adam could even respond, Clara jumped in, her voice full of conviction, saying that if Adam held the position, it was because he was capable, and like any leader, he deserved respect. The atmosphere turned heavy. Some masked their discomfort, others stopped talking to watch the scene unfold. Adam, with a cold smile, decided to strike back. He looked straight at Benjamin and said sharply that this kind of insubordination wasn't tolerated, and if he wasn't satisfied, the company door was wide open. The words landed like a calculated blow, and the arrogant tone only drew more attention from everyone nearby. Benjamin reacted instantly, calling Adam incompetent and saying the company was sinking because of his decisions. The murmuring grew louder. Some tried to intervene, others just watched the clash, knowing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for months. Benjamin then turned to Clara and said firmly it was time to leave. Her response hit like an emotional punch. Looking at her husband, she said she wouldn't go with him and that what he'd just done to his boss was wrong. The silence that followed was broken by hushed comments and stunned looks. For Benjamin, this was the confirmation of everything he'd been feeling lately. He stared at her for a few seconds without responding, just absorbing the weight of disappointment. Then he turned and walked out of the party, crossing the hall while Clara stayed by Adam's side, as if her bond with her husband had shattered right there, in front of everyone. Benjamin left the party and went straight home. He didn't want to deal with conversations or explanations at that moment. He arrived, dropped his jacket on the sofa, and sat in silence, trying to sort through his thoughts. Images of the argument kept coming back, the tone in Clara's voice, the way she had defended Adam as if he were someone worthy of that loyalty. He waited for her to come home that night, but the hours passed and the door stayed closed. It wasn't until the next morning that Clara finally came in. Benjamin was awake, sitting at the table, and asked directly where she had spent the night. She just looked at him and walked to the bedroom without saying a word. The atmosphere became unbearable. Silence filled the rest of the day and continued through the entire weekend. There was no argument, no attempt to reconnect. Just a void that made it clear something had broken for good. On Monday, Benjamin woke up with his decision made. Since the party, Adam's presence at the company had become unbearable. The mere idea of crossing paths with that man in the hallway, hearing his voice in meetings, or taking orders from someone who had crossed every line was something he wasn't willing to endure. This wasn't just a professional conflict, it was personal, deep, and filled with resentment. Working under Adam's command would be like accepting humiliation every single day. He left the house early, without breakfast, his mind fixed on what he would say. On the way, he mentally rehearsed every word, even imagining Adam's expression when he found out Benjamin was leaving. When he arrived, he didn't stop by his desk or greet any co-workers. He went straight to the administrative department and then, without telling anyone, headed to the director's office. Anyone who tried to stop him got only a brief nod, as if talking would be a waste of time given the urgency he carried. He opened the door and walked in. The director looked up, surprised by the sudden entrance, but Benjamin didn't waste time. He said clearly that he was there to submit his resignation. He stated that after what had happened, he no longer wanted to stay in a workplace led by Adam. He explained that he respected the company, but his dignity meant more than any paycheck. The director stayed silent for a moment, observing Benjamin's firmness. Then he leaned back in his chair and said that wouldn't be necessary. He looked Benjamin straight in the eye and added, Adam had been let go that morning. Shocked, Benjamin asked how that had happened. The director took a deep breath and said he regretted being the one to deliver the news, but he'd rather Benjamin hear it directly. He explained that at the party, Adam had stayed with Clara in front of everyone, and the two had left together. The words hit hard. Benjamin stayed silent for a few seconds, absorbing what he'd just heard. Without another word, he left the office and went back home. Clara was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. He walked in, stood in front of her, and asked if what he'd heard was true. She didn't try to deny it. She said it had been a moment of weakness, that she couldn't really explain it, that things had gotten out of control. Benjamin listened without interrupting, but there was no hesitation in the decision he'd already made. He told her to pack her things and leave. Clara stayed frozen for a moment, but when she realized he wouldn't change his mind, she got up and started gathering her belongings. The silence in the house was nearly suffocating, and the door closed behind her without a single word said. The divorce went through faster than Clara expected. In just a few weeks, everything was settled on paper. Benjamin signed every document with the same coldness he'd shown since the day he asked her to leave. There were no messages, no phone calls, no sign of regret. Everything was handled strictly through lawyers, as if every connection had been erased. For Clara, that final stamp felt like a sharp blow. Still, she clung to the idea that somehow, she might find support in Adam. Shortly after receiving the official divorce confirmation, Clara picked up her phone, didn't think too much, and typed a short message to Adam, "We need to talk. Can you meet me?" She sent it immediately, but no reply came. She spent the rest of the day staring at her screen, waiting for a notification that never arrived. She was starting to believe he'd just ignore her when, the next morning, her phone vibrated. It was him, agreeing to meet and suggesting a quiet cafe, away from the company and any place they might be recognized. Clara dressed carefully and arrived early, choosing a corner table where she could see the entrance. Her heart raced when she saw Adam appear. He approached with a serious expression, nothing like the warmth or interest she had imagined. When he sat down, he made no move to get closer, keeping the posture of someone who was there only to close a loose end. They sat, and Clara tried to start the conversation by bringing up what they'd shared, saying she'd made tough choices and that right now, he was the only person she felt connected to. Adam listened in silence, stirring his coffee, until he finally said what they had was just a moment, something he never meant to extend. He added that since the incident at the party, his professional life had gotten complicated and he didn't want any more involvement. Clara had no immediate response. She tried to argue, saying she'd risked everything, but he just repeated that it was better they go their separate ways. He finished his coffee, stood up, and left, leaving her alone at the table. The scene was so quick she took a while to process what had just happened. From there, everything fell apart even more. Without Benjamin, rejected by Adam, and without family support, she stayed with a friend, but the arrangement didn't last. The friend started hearing about the affair and decided she didn't want to be involved. From there, Clara moved to her aunt's house, where she stayed a few days. During that time, Clara managed to get a temporary job at a downtown store. The pay was modest, but enough to move out of her aunt's place and rent a small one-bedroom apartment, simple, with no luxuries. It wasn't the home she'd imagined for herself, but it represented an attempt to restart, and above all, to regain a bit of her independence. While Clara tried to rebuild her life, Benjamin was also making drastic decisions. After everything he learned, the betrayal, the scene at the party, the confirmation that Clara had spent the night with Adam, staying at the same company and in the same city became unbearable. Every hallway in the building felt loaded with memories and whispered comments. Even though Adam was already gone, the story had spread, and Benjamin felt the weight of stares and disguised questions. He tried to keep up his routine for a few weeks, but the tension built every day. The memories were constant, and no matter how much he avoided the topic, he knew everyone there had their own version of events. One morning, he walked into the director's office, thanked him for the opportunity, and handed in his resignation. This time, there was no debate or attempt to convince him to stay, his decision was final. A few days later, he started packing. He sold some furniture, kept only the essentials, and moved to another city, far enough away that he could start over without being recognized or remembered for the story. For Benjamin, more than just changing addresses, it was a way to erase every trace of that chapter and make room for a completely new life. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.